London feels like a thoroughly modern metropolis, a bustling hub of activity. Yet, beneath the surface of the traffic and flashing neon signs lie countless layers of history, a rich tapestry woven over millennia. Tonight, we'll explore how a small Roman settlement transformed into a sprawling city, a vibrant metropolis now home to nearly 9 million people. London, a testament to resilience, has weathered invasions, devastating plagues, catastrophic fires, and even the fury of a tornado, emerging as one of the world's greatest capital cities. We'll begin with a surprising discovery beneath Trafalgar Square, tracing the city's relentless expansion through the ages. Music. So, relax, let your mind wander, and join us as we delve into the fascinating, layered history of London. When you picture London, you might envision Trafalgar Square, a vibrant, dynamic space teeming with tourists and commuters. The iconic red double-decker bus is a constant presence, alongside the distinctive black cabs. The square feels like the very heart of London, the undeniable center. Indeed, nearby Charing Cross serves as the traditional point from which distances from the capital are measured, a testament to its central importance. With the National Gallery standing proudly and Nelson's Column towering over the square, there's an undeniable sense of history permeating the air. This is a place that has witnessed it all, a silent observer of centuries of change. Music. Interestingly, much of the architecture in Trafalgar Square is relatively recent. The National Gallery, for instance, was constructed in the 19th century, as were most of the fountains and monuments that grace the square. However, the area we now know as Trafalgar Square has held significant importance in London's history since at least the 13th century. It also holds a secret, a hidden layer of history that predates even the grandest of human constructions. During building work in the 1950s, excavations unearthed ancient remains, the fossils of cave lions, wild oxen, hippopotamuses, and even rhinoceroses. These magnificent beasts roamed this very spot during the last interglacial period, approximately 120,000 years ago. It's a surreal thought that where taxis now patiently wait at traffic lights, a rhinoceros once freely roamed. But the true human story of London begins, of course, with the arrival of humans themselves. Music. Humans first arrived in Britain considerably earlier, possibly as far back as 800,000 BCE. It's highly probable that human life existed in the London area hundreds of thousands of years before that, although evidence is scant. There are some indications of early human activity, such as the discovery of stone tools and even human remains. However, London wouldn't become a formal, established settlement for a very long time. During the New Stone Age, roughly 4000 to 2200 BCE, communities in Britain began transitioning to a more settled way of life. The nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle gradually gave way to agriculture, as people cultivated crops and domesticated animals, marking a significant shift in their societal structure and daily existence. By the Bronze Age, the London area likely consisted of a number of small, scattered farming settlements, a landscape dotted with flocks of sheep, herds of cattle, and the relatively new addition of domesticated horses, altering the transportation and trading capabilities of these communities. The Iron Age, starting around 700 BCE, witnessed the use of horses to pull carts, which drastically improved trade and travel, leading to increased interconnectedness with the wider world. London was on the cusp of existence, poised to emerge as a prominent settlement, yet its official establishment wouldn't occur until the 1st century CE. Music. The Roman conquest of Britain brought about a pivotal moment in London's history. The Romans, needing a strategically positioned base near the river, selected an area on the banks of the River Thames and named it Londinium. In a very real sense, this is where the documented history of London truly begins. Londinium was initially quite small, occupying an area of about half a square mile, roughly the size of present-day Hyde Park. One could easily walk from one end of the city to the other in about half an hour, demonstrating the compactness of this nascent settlement. Londinium was situated on the northern bank of the River Thames, encompassing the area we now know as the City of London, the historic heart of the financial district where St. Paul's Cathedral stands today. The Romans chose this location for its strategic advantages. The low-lying point on the Thames allowed for easy access by both land and sea, making it an ideal site for a port, crucial for trade and commerce. Music. Londinium quickly became a vital trading hub for the Romans, leading to rapid population growth. By the 2nd century CE, the population swelled to an estimated 60,000, a dramatic increase indicative of the city's burgeoning prosperity. Londinium was also developing in terms of grandeur and infrastructure. At the time, its basilica, a large public building housing law courts and other civic institutions, was one of the largest structures north of the Alps, showcasing the Romans' architectural prowess and ambition. Another significant undertaking was the construction of the London Wall, begun around 200 CE. Upon completion, this impressive wall stretched for over 2 miles, encircling the city and providing vital protection. Sections of this wall, repaired and added to in later medieval times, still survive today, a tangible link to the Roman past. A notable section can be observed near Tower Hill Tube Station. However, in the latter half of the 2nd century, a major fire, possibly coupled with a plague epidemic, devastated much of Londinium, causing a significant population decline. This would become a recurring theme in London's history: periods of expansion followed by disaster, rebuilding, and subsequent growth. While Londinium never fully regained its former glory during Roman times, it remained the capital of Roman Britain, retaining a substantial population, a testament to its enduring importance. Modern London is renowned for its incredible diversity and cosmopolitan character. This characteristic was evident, to some extent, from its very beginnings. Londinium was a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities. DNA analysis has revealed that many inhabitants originated from continental Europe, while others had Middle Eastern or North African ancestry, illustrating the early global connections of this burgeoning city. Individuals came to Londinium for various reasons. Some for work, such as soldiers and merchants, while others had no choice in the matter, brought as slaves by their masters. This inequality, this contrast between voluntary migration and forced displacement, would, sadly, also become a recurring theme in London's long and complex history. Like many other cities throughout history, London often reflected and experienced societal disparities and inequalities. In the early 5th century, the Roman Empire faced immense strain. Overwhelmed by economic woes, political instability, and relentless attacks from barbarian tribes, the empire began to crumble. In 410 CE, when the Britons pleaded with the Roman Emperor Honorius for military aid, their request was denied. This effectively marked the end of the Roman era in Britain, leaving the people of Britain and Londinium to fend for themselves. The following years remained somewhat shrouded in historical uncertainty, lacking substantial archaeological evidence and written records. While the city wasn't abandoned overnight, it undoubtedly entered a period of decline. Without the wealth and protection afforded by Roman rule, deterioration was inevitable. We can envision Londinium shrinking, becoming a much smaller, humbler city, its buildings falling into disrepair, its once imposing walls gradually reclaimed by nature. Eventually, the city may have been largely abandoned, marking a significant turning point in its history. After the Romans departed, new settlers arrived, Germanic tribes hailing from the regions of modern-day Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Some might have arrived even while the Romans were still present in Britain. However, the majority of migration and settlement occurred during the 5th and 6th centuries. These newcomers would come to be known as the Anglo-Saxons, who would exert their influence over Britain for the next 500 years, leaving an indelible mark on the nation's culture and language. Rather than occupying the old Roman city of Londinium, the Anglo-Saxons established new settlements just outside the Roman walls to the west. By the late 7th century, a new London had emerged, Londonwic, a name signifying London Trading Town. Strategically located on the northern bank of the Thames, much like Londinium, Londonwic occupied the area we now know as Covent Garden. Today, many of London's renowned theatres are situated near Covent Garden, a testament to the area's enduring cultural significance, and the name itself, Oldwich, references the area's Anglo-Saxon origins. Music. Beyond its geographical location, much about Londonwic remains uncertain. However, it gradually grew in size and importance as a trading center. Music, a significant shift occurred in the late 9th century, during the reign of Alfred the Great. The focus of settlement seems to have shifted from Londonwick to its neighboring city, the old Roman Londinium. One plausible reason for this change was the presence of Londinium's Roman walls, which were refortified to offer protection against Viking invaders. Therefore, what was once Londinium became the new city center, now known as Londonburg. However, for simplicity's sake, we shall use the name London from this point onwards. Though the name London was recorded as early as the 1st century CE, it wouldn't become widely used and formally adopted until much later. The Anglo-Saxon era could be considered a new beginning for London, a city simultaneously young and old. It marked the official genesis of the City of London, a specific district that continues to exist today, its boundaries still, to some extent, defined by the ancient Roman walls. Today, the London Wall serves as a historical monument. However, during Anglo-Saxon times, it provided much-needed defense against external threats. In those days, London must have felt like a precarious place to live, facing the ever-present threat of Viking invasions. From the 9th century onward, Viking raids were frequent occurrences. London Bridge may have even been destroyed in the early 11th century during an attack led by Olaf II of Norway. Some believe this event might have inspired the well-known nursery rhyme, "London Bridge is falling down." The population of Anglo-Saxon London fluctuated throughout the years, but at its peak, it's estimated to have been no more than 15,000, a mere quarter of Londinium's population during its heyday. Anglo-Saxon London appears to have been a modest center for trade and commerce, but it paled in comparison to Londinium's grandeur. Architecturally, it lacked the magnificent structures and monumental buildings of the Roman era. Nevertheless, the city was gradually taking shape, steadily developing its own distinct character and identity. In 1042, following a period of Danish rule, Edward the Confessor ascended to the English throne. A deeply devout Christian, Edward commissioned the construction of a magnificent new church west of London. Westminster, which would later become a central part of London, was, during Edward's time, a separate entity, although geographically close. The church Edward commissioned would become known as Westminster Abbey. He also had a palace built nearby, allowing him to oversee the construction. Edward lived just long enough to witness the consecration of Westminster Abbey, a testament to his dedication and vision. This project had significant consequences, establishing Westminster as a center of both religious and political power. While Westminster wasn't yet considered part of London, it signifies the city's gradual westward expansion. Edward the Confessor's death in 1066 triggered a succession crisis, culminating in the Battle of Hastings. The Duke of Normandy, better known as William the Conqueror, became King of England, ushering in a new era for both the country and its soon-to-be capital. Within the following decade, William initiated a major construction project, a fortified tower east of the city, known as the White Tower. This structure marked the beginning of the complex that would become the Tower of London. The complex expanded over the years, with additions by subsequent rulers. The Tower of London served multiple roles throughout history: a castle, a citadel, a royal residence, a prison, and the custodian of the crown jewels. It would play a critical role in English history for centuries to come. Control of the tower signified control of the nation itself. In the early medieval period, Westminster was not yet the official seat of government, but it was becoming increasingly established as the center of political power. Grand government halls were constructed in Westminster during this time. By the late 12th century, London had its first mayor, a clear indication of the city's growing importance and the need for effective governance. The population was steadily increasing. In 1200, London had approximately 30,000 inhabitants. Music by 1300, that number had risen to 80,000, making it by far the most populous city in England, and one of the largest in Europe. Although smaller than Paris, London now surpassed Rome, whose population had shrunk to as few as 30,000 during the medieval era. One contributing factor to London's burgeoning population was immigration. Many people flocked to the city in search of commercial opportunities, including merchants and traders from countries such as France, Denmark, and Germany, as well as a large Jewish community. Music, however, tension and anti-Jewish violence persisted in the city, and by the late 13th century, London's Jewish community had been forced to leave the country, a tragic example of intolerance even in a cosmopolitan environment. Sadly, even the most diverse and cosmopolitan cities have their darker chapters, and London is no exception. Music. The city's growing population brought its own set of challenges, particularly the issue of sanitation. Medieval London was notoriously filthy. Music streets were choked with human waste and open sewers, which sometimes flowed directly into the Thames. Slaughterhouses, fishmongers, and tanneries contributed to the pungent atmosphere, creating a significant public health concern. While some attempts were made to clean up the city, such as legislation prohibiting rubbish disposal in the river, London remained a dirty and polluted city for centuries. Despite poor sanitation, medieval London was an impressive, even beautiful city, adorned with palaces, grand mansions, and magnificent churches. This period saw the construction or reconstruction of numerous churches, including the church now known as Old St. Paul's Cathedral. A church had stood on Ludgate Hill since the 7th century. But in 1087, the building was destroyed by fire. Construction of the new cathedral began soon after and continued for over 200 years. By the early 14th century, St. Paul's was one of the grandest churches in Europe, a vast structure with a tall spire and stunning stained glass windows. However, this is not the St. Paul's Cathedral we see today. The old St. Paul's was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in the 17th century, a dramatic event that would reshape the city's landscape. London Bridge, too, was a victim of the city's frequent fires. Over the decades, the wooden bridge was damaged by repeated fires and even a tornado in 1091. This tornado caused widespread devastation in London, destroying hundreds of buildings. In the words of a contemporary historian, it was a great spectacle for those watching from afar, but a terrifying experience for those standing near, illustrating the power of nature and the vulnerability of the city. The wooden London Bridge sustained considerable damage over time. Finally, in 1176, construction began on a new stone bridge, a grand structure lined with shops and houses. At the time, it was the longest inhabited bridge in Europe. London Bridge remained the only stone crossing over the Thames in central London until the 18th century, when Westminster Bridge was built. Poor sanitation, fires, and natural disasters were not the only challenges faced by medieval London. Numerous outbreaks of famine and plague devastated the city, significantly impacting its population. The bubonic plague, known as the Black Death, struck in 1348. Music in London. As many as 200 people died each day. It would take over 150 years for the city's population to fully recover, showcasing both the devastation of the plague and the city's eventual resilience. While the late medieval period was a difficult one, London slowly rebounded. The Tudor period in England, spanning from 1485 with the reign of King Henry VII to 1603 with the death of Queen Elizabeth I, was generally a prosperous time for London. The city was rapidly becoming one of the most important centers of trade and commerce in Europe. Companies formed to exploit new opportunities, not only in continental Europe, but also in Russia, the Levant, and even the Americas, indicating the expanding reach of London's economic influence. Bustling marketplaces thrived, transforming London into an increasingly wealthy and dynamic city, capable of rivaling other European capitals. Despite further outbreaks of plague and other diseases, including the mysterious sweating sickness, London's population continued to grow, increasing from 50,000 to 200,000 during the Tudor period. This growth was partly due to steady immigration. Foreigners flocked to London and the settlements on its borders, such as Southwark, Shoreditch, and Clerkenwell. These towns and villages would eventually become incorporated into London itself. Many of the immigrants during this era were Protestants fleeing persecution in Catholic countries like France and Spain. However, London wasn't always welcoming to these newcomers. Xenophobia was common, and some immigrants eventually left for the Netherlands, perceived as a more tolerant place. London's burgeoning population demanded more space. While legislation attempted to contain the City of London's boundaries, the city inevitably spilled beyond its walls. In the 16th century, urban sprawl expanded westward toward street giles and eastward, leading to the development of areas that would later form the East End, such as Spitalfields and Whitechapel. Fields lined with hedges quickly transformed into streets lined with small houses, tanneries, and breweries. East London housed many of the city's poorer residents. Others lived across the river in Southwark or within the old City of London walls, often in cramped and overcrowded conditions. Aristocrats, on the other hand, enjoyed more spacious and luxurious accommodations in areas like the Strand, although many mansions and palaces were built outside the city in what was then the countryside. Places like Lambeth and Fulham. One of the most extravagant Tudor buildings, Hampton Court Palace, was built 12 miles from the center of London, serving as one of King Henry VIII's residences. The vast scale of the palace reflects the king's expansive court, as well as his need for extensive grounds including tennis courts, bowling alleys, and a hunting park. Even the more affluent areas of Tudor London were likely dirty and chaotic. Those who could afford it generally chose to live elsewhere. However, by the 16th century, London offered something irresistible, a world of culture and entertainment. While medieval London had its own attractions, such as justs tournaments, ice skating on the Thames, and the brothels of Southwark, Tudor London added a variety of more common forms of entertainment, including cockfighting and bear baiting. But there was even more to see and do. From live music in taverns to archery competitions and football, a rather violent sport at the time, the city also attracted artists, poets, and playwrights. A vibrant cultural scene emerged, with traveling theatrical companies staging performances. However, in the late 16th century, plays were subjected to censorship and eventually banned completely within the City of London's jurisdiction, deemed immoral and attracting vagrant individuals. A perhaps more valid concern was the potential for spreading plague among large crowds gathered for performances. Thus, theater companies were forced to seek venues outside of London's boundaries, even constructing new theaters. One notable example is the Globe Theatre, built across the river in Southwark in 1599, which staged plays by a particularly talented writer living in London at the time, William Shakespeare. London continued to flourish in the first half of the 17th century during the Stuart period. However, by the mid-17th century, England and its capital faced unprecedented challenges, a convergence of devastating events. The English Civil Wars, the Great Plague, and the Great Fire of London all occurred within a few short decades. Music for the average Londoner, the latter two events had the most immediate and dramatic impact. The Great Plague of 1665 lasted about 18 months. About 100,000 people perished, a quarter of London's population. The poor were disproportionately affected, as the wealthy could escape to their country estates, showcasing the deep inequalities present within London society. Then, in September 1666, just as life in the capital was slowly returning to normal, a bakery fire in Pudding Lane, in the heart of the City of London, ignited. At that time, central London's layout was still largely medieval. A labyrinth of narrow, winding alleys where many buildings were constructed of wood with thatched roofs, highly flammable materials. The fire spread rapidly, raging for several days, devastating much of the City of London, gutting buildings and leaving countless people homeless. Samuel Pepys, the renowned chronicler of London life, climbed a church steeple to survey the smoldering ruins. He described it as the saddest sight of desolation that I ever saw, capturing the devastation and despair. In the aftermath of the fire, much of London had to be rebuilt. This included St. Paul's Cathedral. Music, the new building, designed in Baroque style by the renowned architect Sir Christopher Wren, who also oversaw the rebuilding of many other churches in London, stood as a symbol of London's resilience and its ambition to rebuild and recover from the devastation. For over 200 years, St. Paul's was the tallest building in the city, dominating the skyline. To this day, with its elegant facade and majestic white dome, it remains one of London's most iconic landmarks. Another consequence of the Great Fire was the displacement of many Londoners. The fire, combined with population growth, accelerated the city's outward expansion as new homes were built. Over time, areas such as Soho, Bloomsbury, and Covent Garden became residential neighborhoods. The unstoppable urban sprawl had begun. Over the following centuries, many surrounding settlements would gradually be absorbed into the expanding metropolis, explaining why some present-day London neighborhoods, such as Islington or Hampstead, retain their distinctive character. They were originally independent villages. The 17th century's period of war, disease, and disaster inevitably took its toll on the city. Yet, London, true to its nature, demonstrated its resilience. The 18th century witnessed a period of rapid population growth, geographical expansion, and an economic boom. In the early 18th century, London's population was approximately 630,000. By the end of the century, it had reached around 1 million. Several factors contributed to this robust growth: declining infant mortality rates, rising fertility rates, and increased migration. Many French Protestants migrated to London during this period. Music: there was also a significant increase in the Irish and Jewish populations, as well as a growing black community. Some black Londoners were employed in domestic service, while others were formerly enslaved individuals who arrived in London via the Caribbean or North America. This included veterans of the American Revolution who had fought for the British. In many ways, 18th century London was a thriving, prosperous city, enjoying a golden age of culture. Famous institutions like the British Museum and the Royal Opera House were founded during this period, attracting leading writers and artists to the city. However, a darker side persisted. Poverty remained widespread, and violent crime was common. In the summer of 1780, the city was rocked by the Gordon riots, initially sparked by anti-Catholic sentiment. An incident of looting and burning escalated into days of widespread rioting, targeting locations including Downing Street and the Bank of England. While law and order was eventually restored, the riots were exceptionally destructive. The property damage in London has been compared to the level of destruction witnessed in Paris during the entire French Revolution. As we enter the 19th century, we see the continuation and acceleration of many existing trends, most notably population growth. London surpassed Beijing to become the world's largest. By the 1860s, London's population had exploded to over 3 million residents. By the turn of the century, this number had more than doubled, reaching over 5 million. This remarkable growth stemmed primarily from natural population increases and internal migration within Great Britain. However, immigration from other nations, particularly Ireland, especially in the wake of the devastating Irish potato famine, also contributed significantly. A substantial number of immigrants were political or economic refugees fleeing unrest and hardship in France, Italy, Germany, and Spain. London's Jewish community continued to expand during this period, and smaller but notable communities from India, China, and Africa also established themselves within the city. By the mid-19th century, a striking 40% of Londoners were not born in the capital itself. Intriguingly, this proportion has remained remarkably consistent, with roughly 40% of present-day Londoners having been born abroad. Another pivotal factor contributing to London's booming Victorian-era population was a significant decline in mortality rates. This positive shift was partially attributable to advancements in sanitation and improved access to nutritious food. Despite these improvements, Victorian London grappled with severe challenges, including widespread poverty and deplorable slum housing conditions. The stark realities of this era are vividly captured in the works of Charles Dickens, such as Oliver Twist and David Copperfield, which offer poignant portrayals of the grim lives endured by many Londoners. Pollution presented another immense problem. London earned the moniker the Big Smoke due to its perpetually smoky atmosphere, a consequence of both industrial emissions and the sheer volume of domestic coal fires. The pervasive soot from this pollution coated everything, from buildings to vegetation and even the sheep grazing in Regent's Park. However, the 19th century also witnessed considerable and concerted efforts to address these challenges. Although high levels of poverty persisted well into the 20th century, the quality of life for many Londoners gradually improved. The Industrial Revolution brought transformative changes across Britain, including the development of the railway network. In the rapidly expanding capital, alleviating the growing problem of street congestion became increasingly crucial. The solution emerged in the form of underground train travel. Construction of the London Underground began in 1860, commencing with the Metropolitan Line, which opened a few years later. Subsequent lines were added throughout the following decades, and by the end of the century, the London Underground, later popularly known as the Tube, transported millions of passengers daily. While other cities, such as New York and Shanghai, later surpassed London's underground system in size and scale, London undeniably pioneered the world's first metro system. During the 19th century, Britain reached the zenith of its imperial power, and its capital, London, became a city of unparalleled global significance. It had become a central hub for international trade and finance, a vibrant metropolis that drew in immigrants, businesspeople, and wealthy tourists from around the globe. Culturally, London was practically unmatched. The 19th century witnessed the establishment of numerous cultural institutions, including the National Gallery and Tate Britain, alongside the construction of iconic landmarks such as Tower Bridge, Trafalgar Square, Big Ben, and the Houses of Parliament. Although government business had been conducted in Westminster for centuries, the Gothic-style Palace of Westminster we see today is a mid-19th century reconstruction, built after a devastating fire destroyed the previous structure. The first half of the 20th century in Britain was profoundly shaped by two world wars. Between 1915 and 1918, London endured bombing raids by German airships, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of civilians, with many more Londoners losing their lives in combat. However, the Second World War, beginning in 1939, had an even more devastating impact. The German bombing campaign, known as the Blitz, inflicted particularly catastrophic damage on London. While not the sole target, London suffered immense losses. Estimates suggest that as many as 30,000 Londoners perished and 1.5 million were rendered homeless during the Second World War. In 1939, London's population at nearly 8.6 million was still immense, yet it had been surpassed in size by New York City. In the decades following the war, London's population continued to decline, especially in inner London. This population shift was attributed to several factors, including significant housing shortages. Many Londoners relocated to the surrounding suburbs and towns, seeking not only housing but also more spacious living environments and cleaner air. From the 1960s onward, government policies, for a complex array of reasons, actively encouraged people to leave London, leading to the expansion or even the creation of new towns in southern England, such as Milton Keynes. The geographical expansion of London also slowed considerably in the mid-20th century, primarily due to government initiatives aimed at curbing urban sprawl. This resulted in a gradual push of Londoners either out of the city or toward its outer edges. London's population didn't begin to rise again until the early 1990s. As London solidified its position as a global financial center, offering attractive job opportunities and an improved quality of life, it once again became a desirable place to live. Today, London boasts a population of nearly 9 million, exceeding all previous records, with an increasingly diverse population. Over 300 languages are spoken in London, making it one of the world's most linguistically diverse cities. Historic structures like St. Paul's Cathedral stand alongside towering modern additions to the skyline, such as the Shard, a 95-story skyscraper. While no longer the world's largest city, London retains its status as one of the most influential and significant global capitals in finance, culture, and tourism. London's future as a global city seems assured, but beyond that, its trajectory remains uncertain. Further growth might occur vertically, with more high-rise developments, or perhaps the city's size and influence might diminish as technology and remote work lead to a more dispersed population. Looking back, one could argue that London reached its zenith in the 19th century. However, this assessment depends heavily on the criteria used. Present-day London still faces challenges, but by many measures, the average Londoner enjoys a higher quality of life than at any previous point in the city's history. It is truly remarkable to imagine the inhabitants of Londinium witnessing the modern capital. The dazzling lights of the West End, the gleaming skyscrapers, the constant flow of traffic across numerous bridges, and the Thames flowing beneath. This vision would undoubtedly surpass their wildest imaginations. London has undergone countless transformations throughout the centuries, repeatedly rising from the ashes. Whatever the future holds, it is sure to be extraordinary.